Friends, we celebrate today the feast of the Holy Family of Mary, Joseph, and the child Jesus. We might say that we mark the fundamental fact that when the Son of God became man, when the Word became flesh, he became flesh as a little child within a family. That was a divine choice, for Jesus did not have to come into our world in that way. He could have come as a 33-year-old adult and begun to preach. He could have come as a teenager or as an 80-year-old. But he was conceived and began his existence in Mary's womb, fully human at conception, but growing until finally he was born as a baby in a family. Why, we might ask? Jesus came to redeem all of human life, which meant redeeming the family. All of existence is meant to be familial. St. John Paul II used to call the Blessed Trinity a family because it is a structured communion of persons in love with a Father, a Son, and the love between them, the Holy Spirit. The human person was made in the image and likeness of God. Male and female he made them, and therefore the image of God is familial. A husband and a wife can love each so much that, like the Trinity, their love can generate a third person. They can literally make love and then name, raise, and live in joyful communion with the love they've made. But man, woman, and children didn't live up to their being in the image of God. Right from the beginning, sin invaded the family. It began with Adam and Eve in the first sin. It quickly passed to their children. Cain killed his brother Abel. There was jealousy between Abraham's sons, Isaac and Ishmael, enmity between Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau, envy between Jacob's 12 sons, 10 of whom ganged up to try to kill their brother Joseph. And there was deadly jealousy in David's family. The list goes on and on. Simply put, the family had become a mess. Maybe some of you see your family as a bit of a mess. As the human family increased and multiplied, so did sin. Jesus was born of a family to come to redeem the family, which has such a crucial role in the world that God created. And so we turn to the Holy Family. Jesus chose to be conceived and born of a woman, but that wasn't all. Even though he had a father in heaven, he willed to be raised by a foster father here on earth. He didn't have to. Even it would have been extremely difficult for Mary to have raised him on her own. All things, as the archangel Gabriel told her at Jesus' conception, are possible for God. But God the Father didn't send Jesus another woman, a second mom, to help Mary raise Jesus. He sent an adoptive dad because, according to his human nature, Jesus needed a dad. And we should not overlook the importance of what God's choices teach us. We call the family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph the Holy Family. I might suggest to you 3 reasons why. First and foremost, because they centered their entire lives around Jesus, the living Son of God. Every family is called to center its life around Jesus the Lord. The family that does this grows in holiness. Second, the family of Bethlehem and Nazareth was holy because all the members of the family strived to do God's will. Mary said, in becoming God's mother, "Let it be done to me according to your word." And Joseph was constantly obeying God through the angel to take Mary as his wife, to flee with Mary and Jesus into Egypt, to return from Egypt after Herod's death. And Jesus' whole life is a lesson in obedience too. St. Luke summarized over half of Jesus' life, the 18 years from the time he was found in the temple to the time he came to the Jordan and began his public ministry, in a sentence that he was to Mary and Joseph growing in wisdom and understanding. And he was obedient to his heavenly Father, even unto death on the cross, saying amidst his agony in the garden, "Not my will, but thine be done." Third, the family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were holy because they really loved each other, which means that they were all willing to lay down their lives for each other, to sacrifice for each other, to bear each other's burdens, to forgive each other. Mary was willing to be stoned to death for being pregnant by some means other than by Joseph, and remained faithful to her son at the foot of the cross, even when almost everyone else abandoned him. And Joseph, he gave up his whole livelihood, his home, his family, to protect Jesus and Mary and flee with them to Egypt. And Jesus obviously gave his life on the cross for them. They forgave each other, even though Jesus was incapable of sin and Mary never chose to sin and Joseph was a saint. There were misunderstandings, for sure, like in the passage of Jesus left behind in the temple that we heard today. Friends, the Feast of the Holy Family is a great occasion for every Christian family to see how well they're imitating the Holy Family, and I might suggest 3 ways also to holiness. First, each family needs to see whether they're centering their lives around Christ. So many families today are centered around the television or around sports or extracurricular activities, if that's the end all, we seem to think, or lessons of one sort or another, or even around work schedules. But Christ needs to be the center of a family's activities. Christ needs to be the main treasure. Mary and Joseph were literally dirt poor. Jesus was placed in an ancient animal feeding trough, and they needed to give 2 pigeons instead of doves at his presentation, but it didn't matter because they were centered on Christ and thus in him had it all. The family centered on Christ will be a family that prays together. The family that prays together stays together. As servant of God, Father Patrick Peyton and also Saint Mother Teresa never tired of saying, it's not enough for the members of the family to pray individually. We're invited to pray together. I think I experienced the powerful impact of family prayer when I had visited some close friends. They pray the rosary together in their family, parents and their 7 children. This prayer isn't always convenient. At times they have to give up doing other things, like going out to play or watching a favorite TV program. At other times they find it difficult to concentrate or avoiding interruptions, but they stick with it or other family prayers. They're growing as a family in their prayer. They pray for each other, for family members and friends in need, for the priests of their parish. They pray for our public leaders. They're united because God unites them as together they lift up their hearts to him in prayer. Second, members of a family need to do the will of God and encourage each other to do the will of God too. Seems obvious, but I think maybe we overlook it sometimes. Many families do this, though. They inspire each other to become holy. They encourage each other to pray when they don't want to. They form them to please God above every other goal. Some of the most beautiful conversations I've seen in the priesthood have occurred during marriage preparation, when the faith of the future bride or groom is so contagious that it inspires the other to start to take the faith more seriously. One gets the other to start to come to Mass after a long absence, perhaps. One gets the other to start praying with him or her. One gets the other to start obeying those commandments which they had otherwise maybe been ignoring. The last of the 3 of these is that each of the family members is called to sacrifice for each other, to forgive each other. Maybe this is the hardest of the 3, right? In some ways it's easy for us to forgive the person out there, and yet the one we share a bed with, we hold the grudge for so long, and yet we're invited to forgive. We're invited to forgive especially when the other has really hurt us, to bear each other's burdens, to help each other out. And that's what family love and real love is about. St. Paul asked the Colossians to put on heartfelt compassion and kindness and humility, gentleness and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. And over all these to put on love. Love, after all, is a decision, an act of our will. It is very practical, and it needs regular practice to truly work. Finally, how's my own perspective on all of this? Well, let me share a little story with you, if I may. There's an American investment banker who was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American banker complimented the fisherman on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, "Only a little while." The American then asked why he didn't stay out longer and catch more fish. The Mexican said he had enough to support his family's needs. The American then asked, "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" The Mexican fisherman said, "I sleep late, I fish a little, I play with my children, I take a siesta with my wife, Maria, and we stroll into the village in the evening where we sip wine and we play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life." The American scoffed. "I have a Harvard MBA and I could help you. You could spend more time fishing and with the proceeds buy a bigger boat. With the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you would have a fleet of fishing boats. And instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you would sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. You'd control the product, the processing, and the distribution. You'd need to leave this small coastal village and move to Mexico City, and then eventually to LA and New York City, where you'll run your expanding enterprise." The Mexican fisherman asked, "But how long will all this take?" To which the American replied, 15, 20 years. "But what then?" The American laughed and said, "That's the best part. When the time is right, you'll announce an IPO, you'll sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions." Millions. Then what? The American said, "Then you'd retire. You could move to a small coastal village where you'd sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take a siesta with your wife, stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play guitar with your amigos." We chuckle. But the reality is, if we look in the mirror, some of us are striving in some ways to live that American's vision of how we're supposed to live, to get ahead, to be successful, to make sure we got everything covered. But I wonder if the Lord is inviting us to ponder the other, even when it seems just a little crazy. For most of us, if we were to pause and look back at our life 10 or 15 years from now, we would probably have to admit that most of what we are doing now is not important. It's stuff the world has told me is important to do. And so I do it, or I make sure that my kids do it so that I or they can get ahead in the world. Ahead of who and why do we have to be ahead? But I will have missed out on the important things, the things that build a holy family, the things that shape a holy soul. Those are the things of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Those should be the things that I'm more concerned about. Friends, the family is simply one of God's greatest gifts. On this day, as we reflect on what we learn about the structure of the family that we see in Bethlehem, we ask Mary to intercede for us and our families, whatever they may look like, to help them become truly holy. And we also ask St. Joseph to intercede so that we might be as courageous in defending the institution of the family, even as worldly distraction may lead us away, or our elected officials may be headed in a very different direction. What will you do today to strengthen your family? God will help. We only need to ask. Friends, as we prepare to celebrate the gift of the Eucharist, coming to this altar to be fed, to be nourished, perhaps we should ask the Lord for the grace to live as his family did. And then we can say, as the Old Testament writer did, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord."